Alright everybody, welcome back, and I apologize for the delay. I had planned to get this video out, this morning, but unfortunately I was not able to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning after having a late night. Regardless, you can see in the background, they finally did it. They added a premium flanker. And if you're looking at buying this thing because you've seen the Su-30SM in the tech tree and you're thinking about getting this because surely it must be the same, this is a very different beast. It's a lot worse than the Su-30SM. There's a reason why it's 13.3, though this is easily one of the best 13.3s. And a big part of this, though not all of it, is the flight model. So the flankers in general have had a lot of controversy over their flight models, though recently they have had several improvements, and nowadays stuff like the Su-27SM is actually very respectable in terms of flight performance. But now add almost a ton of extra weight and remove the improved engines, and all of a sudden you have the Su-30MK2. Compared to all the other flankers around the battle rating, it's worse than almost all of them in terms of flight performance. Of course being worse than the Su-27SM and the J11B, but also being worse than the J11A and the normal flankers as well. To make this easier to see, I actually went to StatShark and put the Su-27S, the Su-33, the J11A, and the Su-30MK2 all together. And you can see this is a mess. So I went ahead and I got rid of some of the lines just to make it easier to see. You can see their overall flight model is pretty similar, with just some tweaks like drag, of course, the engines, and the big thing here is weight. You can see in terms of sustained turn performance, it loses out to every other flanker on this list except for the Su-33. It's not very ideal. Now, the flight model is still good enough for your average ARB game. You're not going to be having major issues because, let's be real, 1v1 dogfights don't happen that often. This more so just means that you're going to be bleeding a lot more speed whenever you're trying to dodge missiles than other flankers would, for example. You also accelerate slower, which means you're going to have a harder time recovering from that. What I've typically been doing to try and get around this is actually climbing a little bit. Not a lot, you don't want to be up in space, and especially in the contrails. But if you just get, 3 to 6 kilometers of altitude, this allows you to drop on most people that are hugging the deck and fire missiles from above. It also means that if you do have to dodge missiles, you can drop your nose and help get some speed back that way. Now, speaking of missiles, this is where it gets exciting, because this thing has a great kit for a 13.3 vehicle. It's not going to be the best for doing long-range BVR, but in terms of the actual War Thunder meta, it is very competent. Launching missiles from 40 to 50 kilometers away can be funny, but being realistic, against a player that even slightly knows what they're doing, those are not going to connect. Your best bet is going to be getting up close and personal, firing them from close range where they don't really have time to react. And you also want a missile where, if someone does get to close range, you can easily shoot it off-board and get back into the notch quickly. And the RVVAE, which is the export designation for the R77, does that very well. The R77 has both excellent agility and excellent acceleration off the rail. The only downside to this is that it does not have the greatest range. So typically, I don't shoot from outside the range that my HMD can give me, which is about 20 kilometers. Stick to within that, you're not going to have any issues with it. It's a very reliable and very respectable missile for ARB. And you can carry up to 6 of them, which again, for 13.3 is very solid. Before this, we had, the F-16s at 13.3 with access to AMRAAMs or Derby, and they also get 6 of those activator homing missiles. But they don't get any IR missiles to go along with it, which this can carry 4 R-73s, and you also get your choice of bringing a couple different missiles along with too. Now, I would recommend making sure you prioritize bringing R-77, so I do still like bringing a couple R-27s as well, because if you've used them before, you'll know that both the R-27ER and the R-27ET are still very capable in their own little niches. Kinematically, the R-27ER still beats most of the activator homing missiles in the game, and it is, I would say, more difficult to notch than, say, your average AMRAAM. If you are trying to do some BVR stuff like you see me doing in the background, bringing a couple R-27ERs is an excellent choice for that. You still have 4 R-77s to go along with that closer range fights, but the R-27ER is still very capable. And if you have someone that starts notching you, well, the R-27ER is also excellent against those people as well. Personally, though, I'm still a big fan of IR, not just because stuff like the R73 can do that in the background. No, this gets access to the R27ET, 2 of them on the wings, unlike the 6 of the ERs that you can bring. But the thing with the ET is that it has some excellent surprise ability. They're not too great against flares anymore unless you're like perfectly rear aspect at somewhat close range. But if you fire them at, 7 to 8 kilometers, a lot of the time people will not see it coming. They're especially good at Tomcats that like to drop their load and then try and leave. This is a very competent 13.3, and while I don't think it is the best 13.3 flanker, since, the J11A is there now, it does have one thing over the J11A and over the other 13.0 flankers that I need to mention, which is very important in ARB. It gets access to a fully digital RWR. This means you get exact bearings and exactly what is looking at you. Though unfortunately, the flankers have very limited coverage angles. You're going to want to be very careful whenever you're playing this thing, because if someone gets to even somewhat above or below you, you will not get a launch warning in these angles. You have massive blind spots. And before I move on to the cast load, one more thing, especially for all the players who are just going to be playing their first flanker. I know you're going to be tempted to use the maneuver button, the Cobra button. Try and avoid using it at all costs. You can see this thing, even without the button, bleeds tons of speed, and I am going to die because of it. Use the button sparingly, not every time you get into a dogfight. Now, in terms of ground RP, this thing is solid. You would only have to up-tier your T80 UK slightly to be able to use this. Unfortunately, it does not get a targeting pod, so you're stuck with the Missile Seeker, and the missile itself is decent. The range is incredible. You can launch this thing basically as soon as you spawn. The only thing for me is that it is relatively slow, and so it quite often gets shot down by enemy SAMs from my experience. You can bring 4 of them though, along with 2 KH-29, so what I have found is the KH-59 works as a great decoy if you want to use the KH-29 to actually kill the SAM. If you catch someone that is incredibly unaware and or stationary, these are excellent, because you can lock the ground from the entire map, really. Fire it, and then once it gets close enough, it'll actually lock on. And they do actually have some terrain following capability as well. The issue is, from my experience, if I let them do that, they have a high chance of just simply missing the target. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what y'all think in the comments down below, and I hope y'all have a great patch day. And, peace, y'all. Catch you next time.